forget about the end result that you want from the interaction, is to work on just building rapport and connection with the other person, because you're not going to be able to lead them in most circumstances until there's a level of trust and connection between the two people.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where we bring you conversations with leaders who are making an impact in business and our communities. My guest today is Mitchell Weisburgh. He's the founder of MindShifting with Mitch and the author of 2 books on the topic of mind shifting. Thanks for being here with us today, Mitch.
Jason, thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about leadership.
Absolutely. So before we get into what mind shifting is, how are people out there sabotaging themselves?
Well, that has to do with mind shifting, so I have to link them. And people are sabotaging themselves because we all have really these 2 parts to our brain. One is our survival parts of the brain, which react really, really quickly. And the other is the parts of the brain that we like to think of as human, which is our creative thinking, our our ability to empathize with others, to connect with other people, our ability to critical thought, critical analysis. And that part of the brain actually acts in about 2 to 3 seconds after a stimulus, whereas the survival parts of the brain, which were designed to protect us, they have to react really quickly to danger. So they're reacting in hundredths of a second. And you get sabotaged when you have a survival reaction to a situation that really calls for us to align what we're doing with what our higher values are. And when we don't do that, we tend to fight or flee or freeze or just do something out of habit or copying what everybody else does instead of figuring out what's the best course of action. And that causes us to sabotage ourselves in business, in family life, in relationships, in virtually everything that we do.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing, and I've seen it in the leadership. I mean, in my personal life, but also in the leadership world, in the corporate world, in the business world, where people are increasingly responding to that instinct in the first couple of seconds. They're reacting; they're not really responding. And I think some of it is this big push for authenticity that we hear a lot about. People think that being reactive is being authentic, and they also think it's being strong and decisive sometimes. So not only have you identified the problem, but you have actually built a system to help people get past that first couple of seconds. So now tell us what mind shifting is and how does it help us avoid that sabotage?
Okay, so I look at we get sabotage in really 3 different areas. The first area is in our brains. We access our survival parts of the brain instead of our resourceful parts of the brain. And so that first part is, how do you realize when you're in survival mode and you're not in resourceful mode? And then how do you get into resourceful mode so you can think of alternatives, you can analyze information, you can take in new information, you can connect with people, and you can use others. The second element of it is just the way we react to situations naturally. We go into a situation and we assume that there's one right answer. And when we find that one right answer, that means that anybody else who has a different answer is wrong. And it means that we're going to do that one right thing. And whatever it is that we do is going to solve the problem. Well, how many times does the one right thing actually solve the problem the very first time we do it? Practically never. And so the second part of mind shifting is to be able to understand, hey, something, I'm going to do something. It's probably not going to solve the problem. It may not be the only way of going about it, but I'm going to use whatever comes back as feedback that allows me to adjust and take the next step, rather than judging something as failure or blame or going back to our survival brain. And then the third part of it is that whatever we do, we're probably doing it with other people. Like, we're trying to influence them, we're trying to lead them, we're trying to sell to them, we're trying to manage them. And it probably doesn't happen with you, but it happens with me, that sometimes people just don't do the things that I think that they should do. Sometimes they try to compete with me. Sometimes they get in my way. Sometimes they try to harm me. Sometimes they have different opinions, and our natural reactions as human beings tend to make the situation worse because we try to convince them with facts and logic, or we try to steamroll over them. But there's 50, 60 years of research that shows that there are ways of working with people that we don't like, that get in our ways, that aren't doing what we want them to do, so that together we can come up with solutions that are better than any one of us could have come up with on our own. And so that third part is taking conflicts and turning them into collaboration situations. And so to me, those are the three elements of mind shifting. First, to be able to realize when you're in survival brain and switch to resourceful brain. Second, to be prepared so that there are maybe multiple ways of handling something, and if what we first try doesn't work, to be able to use that as information rather than judging it or attaching blame. And third, to be able to work with people even when we're sure that they're just being jerks or they're lazy or whatever, to be able to reach out and work with them in order to come up with better solutions.
Yeah, and I think while it's true there are certainly jerks who are out there, there are certainly lazy people, there are certainly people who are trying to do the bare minimum or even less out in the workplace. I think a lot of what happens in my experience is we have this saying in the military of people don't rise to the occasion under stress, they fall to their level of training. And I think a lot of people just haven't gotten this kind of training. So let's dig into some of the things you help them with. And you kind of described these already, but I'd like to dig into, you have three components of this: resourcefulness, resilience, collaboration. You talked about where they break down. How would we really like these to look in our both our personal and our professional relationships?
Well, I think if when as people, we're going to react to other people. So when a person says something to us, we're going to react. First of all, trying to find some threat. So a person criticizes us, or we try to help a person and they react negatively. We're going to take that as, wait a minute, this person is resisting me. This person is challenging me, and we're going to react from our survival brain also with fight or flight. So I'd say the first thing is to build the self-awareness to understand that just because your first instinct is to fight, flight, freeze, do something that's habitual or copy others, that doesn't mean that we have to do that. And to be able to then tap into our abilities to be resourceful. But then the next thing is that the other person and the situations are going to continue to trigger us. And so how do we stay in a frame of mind, and how do we slowly win them over so that they're working with us? And I would say, I look at it as kind of 6 different steps. When you're, with the and the first step isn't even part of the 6. The first step is to get ourselves into a resourceful frame of mind. Once we're resourceful, I would say, is to forget about the end result that you want from the interaction, is to work on just building rapport and connection with the other person, because you're not going to be able to lead them in most circumstances until there's a level of trust and connection between the two people. So it's to ask yourself the questions and ask them the questions, like, what could I say? What could I do to get this person to trust me, to establish rapport? Once you have rapport, it's to be able to ask questions about the situation in a way that's non-threatening. So asking questions like, why did you do something so stupid? Something that's probably not the best question to ask, because it's a challenging question. But to say, let me understand the situation. What is it that happened first? And to be able to repeat, not in exact words, but to summarize what the other person said in non-threatening terms as well. And then third would be exploring their current thinking. Well, given the fact that this is what happened, what were you thinking of doing, or what are you thinking of doing? How do you think the situation should be handled? And then clarifying the goals. Fourth would be clarifying the goals and values. So, given that this is what this is what happened. This is what you're thinking of doing. What do you really want to happen here? What would be best for all of us? And in that case, it's also important to get your own goals and values out there, because this isn't one sided. You have to meet all players' needs in this case. So clarifying goals and values, and then fifth would be examining misalignment. Where, given the fact that these are your goals, given the fact that this is what you're thinking, how do you think that's going to play out, and where might that not be working? And then, okay, so it doesn't look like some of the things that we were thinking of doing are going to be working. What are like 5 or 6 different things that we could do in here? And so you want to come up with multiple things that you could possibly do and mix and match among those to eventually pick the one or two that people are comfortable doing, and then confirming commitment. Think questions like, given, if you could rate this, let's say between 1 and 10, where 10 means you're absolutely sure this is going to work and that's what you're going to do, and 1 is there is no way that you're going to do this, how would you rate your commitment to doing this? And then, when they say, let's say a 3, it's like, well, okay, so that's interesting. So you picked a 3. Why didn't you pick a 2? And so you're giving them a chance to sell themselves on why they didn't pick a lower number. So I would say, when you're working with other people, first, take care of yourself. Put your oxygen mask on first. Make sure that you're resourceful, and then work on building rapport. Ask your questions to understand the situation. Explore what the current thinking is. Clarify goals and values. Examine where things are misaligned. Explore different alternatives, and then confirming commitment. That was probably a longer answer than you had intended me to give, so I'm sorry if I rambled on.
Absolutely okay. I have no preconceived notion about how long or short an answer should be, so I'm glad you were so thorough in that answer. It's going to be really great for the audience here. Now, we've had a lot of guests on the podcast who have talked about resourcefulness. They've talked about resilience. They've talked about collaboration, but we typically hear about these things. We talk about being a resourceful individual. We talk about being a resilient individual. And then collaboration is kind of a separate topic. Why is it so important that we think of these 3 elements together instead of treating them as individual characteristics?
Well, in basically Western civilization, we tend to break things apart. So we say, we're going to be studying math now. We're going to be studying science now. We're going to be studying English now. But in real life, things happen that involve a little bit of math, a little bit of science, a little bit of writing, a little bit of communication. And, in real life, we have to deal with all of those different aspects. So we want to break them apart so you understand how each one works. But you also need to understand that this is a complex world that we're living in, and each of them affects each other. And so we have to understand how resourcefulness how affects our ability to be resilient, and how being resilient affects our ability to be collaborative with other people.
Now, earlier you mentioned fight or flight, right?
Right.
That's kind of the core of this, that first couple of seconds. But sometimes we get locked into these fight or flight things for longer than that. What's some of the psychology behind the cause of this, and then the psychology behind using these 3 elements, resourcefulness, resilience, and collaboration, to break that pattern?
So the survival parts of the brain, generally called the limbic system, there are really 5 different types of actions that part of the brain takes, will take to a situation. And it generally comes up with those in like hundredths of a second. Certainly in less than a second, it's already decided what you should do. And so fight, flight, and freeze are the ones where we feel most stressed. We're gonna choose from one of those, but also the things that we can do without thinking about. So the things that we're already proficient in, we tend to keep on doing them. And then humans are social animals, so we're looking around and say, well, what is everybody else doing in this situation? And then when we get challenged, that's when we go back primarily to fight, flight, and freeze. So I would say that the first step is to become self-aware. You could call that metacognition, to be aware of when we're acting from fight, flight, freeze, or habits, or following the crowd. And then for ourselves is really 3 different types of actions that we could choose that we choose from in order to become more resourceful. First of all, just by being self-aware, sometimes that's enough. So you may be doing something, your wife may say something to you and it triggers you, and you may be self-aware enough to say, well, wait a minute, I'm just being triggered. What she said is just what she said, and it's okay. And so that just being self-aware may be enough. It may be that you're working with somebody, maybe somebody who's under you, or maybe somebody who's your boss, and they say or do something that really triggers you, and you realize, well, I am really triggered right now, and just the realization of that isn't enough to calm you down, and you really need 30 to 90 seconds for those stress hormones to be flushed out of the brain so that you can be calm again. So so sometimes you can do that through positive self-talk. And positive self-talk is talk that opens you up, like, well, what is it that I would really want to happen here? Or what would make this fun? Or if this turned out really well, what's a result that I feel that I could live with? So it's questions you could feel in each one of those questions that it's opening up your brain to more possibilities. And so positive self-talk is the second thing that you could do. And then the third thing you could do is to give yourself some distraction or time. It could be that you say, well, wait a minute, I'm just going to take a break now. It could be that you say, well, I'm going to pay attention to my breath for 30 seconds and concentrating on the noise that it makes when I'm breathing in and when I'm breathing out. So some type of a mindfulness or meditation. It could be sports. It could be listening to the tone of somebody's voice rather than the actual words that they're using. It could be art. It could be listening to music. It could be taking a walk. It could be taking a walk in nature. So something that gets your mind off of the original problem, because the more you think about the problem, the more the problem becomes bigger. By distracting it, you're allowing those stress hormones to dissipate, and you're allowing your resourceful parts of the brain to slowly take back over. Now, sometimes that distraction can be as little as 30 to 60 seconds. Sometimes it has to be more. And frankly, sometimes as individuals, we're not capable of doing that by ourselves. It's just a problem that we're having right now. And we need somebody else to talk us down. And that could be a therapist. It could be a friend. It could be a relative. I have, my kids are adults. And when not that I get into that mode every day, but when I get into the mode that I can't calm myself down, I can't be resourceful again, I will very often call one of my kids and say, help me through this. I'm really feeling stressed about this. And, they'll joke with me like, Dad, you wrote the books on this. Why are you calling me? Okay. But then, they'll just walk through because they know the techniques. They've, I've used those techniques in, helping them grow up, and they've read the books, and so they have the vocabulary that they can help me walk myself down from the blank.
Okay, so the advice is minimum 30 to 90 seconds before you make a decision and take a course of action. Now, I'm not talking about time critical situations. I'm reminded of when I was in Iraq and the alarms would go off, the sirens would go off. We'd have to run for the shelters because there were inbound rockets coming. So 30 to 90 seconds would not have been helpful to us there. But in general, out in our workplaces, with some exceptions, some reasonable exceptions, 30 to 90 seconds before we decide on a course of action and take action.
Right. And I'll say, as you bring up real combat situations, and you're in the military, so you've probably been grounded in OODA loops, right? OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act. And one of the key things there is that if you know a type of situation is possibly going to occur or likely to occur, is to simulate that situation so you develop the immediate reactions so that when it does occur, you have a number of different tools in your toolkit that you can draw on. And so preparing for those situations in advance, you're about to have a conversation where you're going to have to give somebody criticism, and you step into that situation blind. that situation is probably going to go south really quickly. But if you know you're gonna have a tough conversation with somebody, you can prepare and say, well, what as I bring these points up, what is this other person likely to say? And so you practice the things that you might say in response, and eventually you know how to handle more and more of those difficult situations.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the OODA loop. I'm very familiar with that. I'm from the Air Force. We invented the OODA loop. It was really designed for fighter pilots in really time-critical situations to do something. And it's great in time-critical situations. It's great in non-time critical situations as well. Can you just run through quickly what the 4 elements of the OODA loop are, and anything else you want to add about how you use this in your work?
Yeah, so John Boyd was an Air Force fighter pilot and trained fighter pilots, and he's the one who developed this. And OODA is OODA. It stands for 4 different. It's an acronym: observe, orient, decide, and act. And it's a loop because you're constantly observing. In orienting, you're using your past experience and any new information to come up with things that you might be able to do. Part of that is analyzing what's happening, and part of it is coming up with new types of responses that you could do that nobody may have heard of before. So the goal of that orient stage is to come up with a couple things that you might do and your expectations about how they're going to work out. Then you decide, well, which one or ones of those am I going to do? And then you act, and you're observing many different things. You're observing, how well did I do this? You're observing, did it give me the results that I expected? You're observing, how is the other side reacting to this, so that you can then go back and reorient. So you're always looking for that next step. I'm observing so that I can orient again, come up with some other things to do. I can decide, and then I can act again. Now, in the OODA loop, the more tools that you can come up with rapidly, the more likely you are to prevail. And John Boyd called that getting inside the other person's loop. So if you can loop through actions really faster than the other person, and he was regarding it as a fighter pilot. So it's like, if I bank left and the other person starts banking left, and I realize that stepping on the accelerator is going to confuse him, and then stepping on the brakes is going to confuse him even more. Eventually, he's going to be so confused he's not going to know what to do, and then I'm going to destroy his plane. In work situations or in coaching situations, it's like, I'm going to advise this person. They're probably going to object, but when they object, I have these explanations ready. When I give this explanation, they may object again, but I know how to respond to that also. And I have prepared 10 different responses to whatever that may happen, and I can deploy them really quickly. So eventually they're not going to know what to do, and they're going to go ahead and do what I'm advocating for them to do, because they're going to be confused and not be able to cope with the variety of actions that I'm developing, and they won't be able to react fast enough.
Yeah, and I want to put a plug in for how important it is after you act to go back to the beginning of that loop, because I've seen a lot of people talk about the OODA loop and do the 4 steps and then call it good and then continue to bang on the solution that's not working, because that's what they decided during the decide phase, and that's what they acted on in the act phase. So it's really, really important to go back to the beginning and start observing and orienting again. And then, you may have to redecide, or you may decide, what you may decide is, I'm going to give this a little time and see if it works. But it's really important to go back to the beginning of the loop and
Yep.
go through the loop, not just act and call it good.
Right. And he didn't use this next thing that I'm going to say, but I think he did this intrinsically, is that when I teach about the OODA loops, I talk about the fast OODA loop and the slow OODA loop. The fast OODA loop says, when you're in this situation, you don't have time to really be creative and to think of new things. So you have to have the tools at your disposal already. But after you've done it, whether you won or you lost, or you had the results that you wanted to, or you didn't have the results that you wanted to, there's some time between that and the next time you're going to be doing the same thing. That's the time to analyze, well, what did I do? How did that work? what could I have done differently, and build up those skills. And as you know, you pointed out, I guess in a conversation that you had a few weeks ago with a person, Bill Benjamin, that the parts of our brain that that react quickly, they are trainable. And so that slow OODA loop, that where you have the time, your purpose is building those reactions so that when you're in the situation, you have a wider variety of tools that you can rely on.
Yeah, and to pull on that just a little bit, that's why after every flight sortie, there's a debrief, right? And so we talk about what worked and what didn't work. And we do that not just to the point of individual sorties and individual flights and squadrons. We have this big exercise out here. I think it's like 5 or 6 times a year now in Las Vegas, called Red Flag. And we bring squadrons from all over the world, and we bring them in, and we do this big air war up in the northern ranges above the city. And we do that slow OODA loop part. We do that slow analysis part after every sortie. And not just individually, we do this in a big auditorium with all the data up on the screen, so everyone can see this is maybe what you thought happened, but this is what really happened as it was captured on the sensors.
And companies do this with sales calls. Some companies do this with management meetings. Companies do this with product development. That going back and rethinking, okay, we just had a sales call with a very important client. We got them or we didn't get them. Let's review how we prepared for that. Let's review what they said and how we responded. And let's get better so the next time we're in a similar call, we make the sale a lot easier. We can do that with management. We can do that with new product development. We can do that with everything. It's not just military.
That's great. So we talked about a lot of things we can do for ourselves to build this in ourselves. Mm-hmm. How can we help our team, the people on our team, develop this in themselves?
We just have to tell them what to do, right? And they'll just do it, right? I'm just kidding. So, that's part of, so a lot of what we've talked about is what I would call like self-regulation, okay? Being able to ourselves be self-aware of, are we in a survival mode? Are we resourceful? How do we prepare for situations? And then working with others is really a matter of not just telling them what to do, but learning how to co-regulate. So it's really learning how to ask them the questions so that they build up the capabilities so that eventually they're able to do that themselves. Tell me about the situation. And, just another aspect of John Boyd is that the information that we get is the most valuable piece of the process. And if we're going to use that information as a mechanism for rewarding or punishing somebody, then we've destroyed the value of the information, because the whole system gets corrupted because everybody is concentrating on their reward or punishment. So, as an example, in a sales call, if the person didn't get the client, and you're taking that information and you're punishing them, like, this was our most important client, or we never should have lost this. You're going to be docked, or you're not going to be able to get your bonus, or something like that. Well, then what they're learning is, I have to be able to give this person the information in order to get my bonus, in order to get my commissions, not to get the information in order to improve. So as a leader, it's to understand that your goal is to get the information so that you can co-regulate the other person so that they can improve, not to get the information so that by way of punishing them or rewarding them, you're going to get them to do the right thing.
That's fantastic. All right, I want to take a little break and play a game with you. Are you up for a game?
I hate games.
All right. The name of this game is Rapid Response.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you a series of questions. I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Now, do not be fooled by the word rapid. You don't have to give a one-word answer. Elaborate as much or as little as you'd like. We just want to try to get to know Mitch a little better, okay?
Okay. All right. Now, you may find when you get to know me that, I'm not even interesting.
Well, that's never happened yet on this podcast, but there is a first time for everything. So let's see. All right. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right, Mitch Weisburgh, rapid response round. Your time begins now. A podcast recommendation.
So I listened to Bernie Fransgrote. I listened to a person named Doug Brown. I would say those two are probably two podcasts that aren't, as well known as the big podcasts, but they both have very interesting things to say. And for women, it isn't just for women, but she focuses on women. I would say Jen Loinding. She has a podcast called Starter Girls. I'm obviously a man, and I always find that there's a couple of interesting things that she brings up in her podcast. But for the women, I would say Jen's podcast, Starter Girls.
That's great. What is a practice you'd like to see more people embrace?
Pausing before reaction. I'd like to see people. It's funny because I was talking with my sisters a couple weeks ago, and one of my sisters was saying to her husband, "Well, didn't your mom tell you that you should always count to 10 before you react to something?" And her husband says, "No, I never do that before." But yeah, I would say I would love for people to pause a little bit and to be able to get equanimity before they make a response.
I think that's great advice, and it's advice I'm going to try to embrace as well. Mm-hmm. Who is someone we should all be paying attention to?
So I'll say there's a book that I'm currently reading for the third time. It's called I Am That, and it's really all about how we all have a spark inside of us, and when we pay attention to that spark, it helps us align to our higher level values. And I would say that for everybody, there's something in that book that you can get that helps you align your life to what's really important to you. So I Am That. His name is Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. He actually passed away probably 20 years ago, but I would say that to me, that book is a classic.
All right, I will add that to my list. What is either your get pumped up song or your walk on music?
So it's funny that you say that, because I love listening to music, and I like to practice Spanish, so I end up listening to a lot of Spanish music. But when you said that, the song that like popped into my brain was the song "The World Should Revolve Around Me" by Little Jackie. And it's like, something, the world should revolve around me. So I'm going to go with "The World Should Revolve Around Me" by Little Jackie.
All right, I don't know that, so I'm going to have to go check that out. Who or what is the biggest influence in your life?
I would say my parents, who are both passed away now, but they were so opposite, other than the fact that they both had high morals and high character. But my dad was always, everything is built on analysis, and my mom was always, everything's built on what you think should be right. And seeing that yin and yang and being able to grow up hearing both sides of it, I think that's really driven most of what I do in my life.
I love that. Do you have another book everyone should read?
I like the books by, you'll never get the spelling based on how he pronounces his name, but Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He's a psychologist, or was a psychologist out of University of Chicago, and he I just forgot the name of the book. It's a book about when we're most excited and doing something. I guess the book is called Flow. So he's the one who I believe invented the term flow, and he described it and how you get in a condition where you are so excited about what you're doing that you're enjoying it, you're working hard, you're learning, and you lose all track of time. And I think that's to me is a seminal book.
That's great. I have not read that. I will have to check that one out as well. What is your favorite winter recreational activity?
So I'm in the Northeast U.S. where it gets cold in the winter, and they've invented a sport in the 1950s called platform tennis. And if you play it outdoors, if the court is raised above the ground, it's about a third the size of a tennis court. It's covered in chicken wire, and you play doubles almost exclusively. And getting out on an evening when it's well, we're US, so when it's like 25, 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're with a bunch of other guys, and when you're finished, you have a beer or two, and you talk about the game. So you've had good exercise, you've been outside, you have camaraderie. To me, that's great activity. So I'd say platform tennis, and you can look it up on YouTube, and you can see some incredible points. I'm a lot more efficient than those great players because they're hitting the ball 30 or 40 times. I can end a point in just 2 shots. Either I'll miss it or I'll put it away.
I grew up in the Northeast, and I have never heard of this. And it sounds like such a typical Northeast thing. I can't believe I've never heard of this. And it sounds marginally safer than lawn darts.
Yeah, I think so. I wanted to be a catcher in lawn darts, but I decided that was too risky.
Yeah, that's you don't see a lot of long careers in being a catcher in lawn darts. So, which is also a very typically New England thing. What is your dream vacation spot?
Well, what my wife and I love to do is we love to go bicycling in a wine region. So we've been to France, Argentina, Chile. We like to go upstate New York to the Finger Lakes. We've been to California, state of Washington, state of Oregon. And so we'll just, bicycle. We'll bike for, let's say, 8 or 10 miles, stop at a winery. We'll share a tasting, so the alcohol doesn't really affect us. Get back on the bikes, and after 5 to 10 miles, all the alcohol's burned off anyhow, and we can go taste. Some more wines. And the biggest risk to us is that we end up buying a case of wine at most places that we go tasting, so we have more wine than we could possibly consume, unfortunately.
That sounds like a fantastic way to do wine tasting. It's it sounds like a much healthier way to do it than the way most people typically do it.
Right, than going out in a car, right?
Yeah. What is a trend you're excited about?
What's a trend that I'm excited about? I think that I think that people are starting to understand that technology is a two-edged sword. And so we're starting to understand that we need to place our own limits around how we use technology, and that we can use technology for good, and we can't let technology drive us into doing bad things. And I think one of the things that's come out of that is the idea of banning phones in schools, which I probably 3 years ago I probably would have been against it, but I think that there's a time to use technology, but banning having kids be without their phone for 5 or 6 hours during the day is not that terrible. And it really gets them to start talking to each other and pay attention to class. And then they go home, or they go out of school, and they can go back on their phone and they can use it for whatever they want to use it. So the understanding that technology has both good and bad to it, and that we are the people, we're the boss, and we should be the ones who are making the choices about how we use the technology.
Yeah, the school district here is doing that right now. It's having varying degrees of success depending on how much it's enforced. But it seems to be a positive outcome for the kids right now. So I'm kind of for it. I kind of need to do the same thing. Maybe put my phone away for 5 or 6 hours a day. Right, I think I need to build into my life a way to do that.
It's hard, but we can, because our brains are plastic, so we can control our brains, and that's the whole thing about mind shifting. Okay, is we can take control, and we can be the boss, and we can decide what is it that we want to do.
All right, last one. Favorite sports team or player?
So I think probably Rafael Nadal would be about my favorite player. I like watching tennis. I grew up in the New York area, and I've been a Mets fan and a Jets fan and a Knicks fan. And at different times in my life, I had season tickets to all of them, and I've dropped the season tickets to all of them. And to be honest, I rarely, now the Knicks are good this year, so I've missed out this year, but I've kind of stopped watching those sports. But I still love watching a good tennis match. I know Nadal's retired, but watching the not that they're kids, but the new tennis players come up, watching the women's game, which is very exciting. I really enjoy watching tennis.
Okay, you think you can take Nadal in a game of platform tennis?
No, absolutely not. He could play right-handed and beat me. I'm sure. The first time.
Well, if you're interested in doing that, maybe we'll bring the cameras out and get that.
Oh, I would do it. I would try. All
right. You bring Nadal, I'll bring the cameras.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for playing our game. It's nice to get to know you a little bit, Mitch, that we wouldn't normally from the other questions. So,
no, Jason, they were fun questions. They were fun questions.
Cool. I'm glad. I want to get back to it. You've given us some great advice. You've built this great system that we've talked about. How did you come to build this? Was there something you faced in your own life that prompted this work?
Well, I started off, I guess my second career was in education and education technology. And I went into education technology because I'd already built businesses, business to business businesses. And I felt, education should be the way that we give every kid a chance to live a great life. And technology can do that. And that was back in 2000, 2001. And around 2017, I'm looking at things and I'm saying, we do have technology in the schools. It could be there more, but we're not doing a better job teaching kids than we did. Kids aren't prepared to be adults. They're not prepared for life. They're not prepared for work. They're not prepared to be citizens. And, and I'm thinking about that at the same time that I was asked to talk to some kids about education technology. And I just snapped. It's like, no, I'm not talking about education technology. I'm talking about the mindsets that you need in order to be successful. And so I agreed that I would teach a 2-day course to kids, college kids, about mindsets in order to be successful. And I had 6 months to do it. And so I just read up on all these different areas, put together the 2-day course, and it was an absolute hit with the kids because nobody ever told them that just because they thought something was true didn't mean it was true. It's just a story. Nobody told them that just because they're angry with somebody doesn't mean that the person is wrong. It just means that they're angry with somebody and they can change their attitude and they can find out that maybe this person has things that could help them. And it was just an immediate survival reaction that they had. And so that's how I learned that all of these tools are learnable and they are teachable. And so that was really the moment that it crystallized. I need to get out of education technology and I need to start doing this mind shifting and see if we can change the world. Because just imagine, we have 7 billion people on this planet. What if we had a critical mass of people that could be resourceful, even if they were angry? They start off angry or they start off being upset. Or they could be resilient, even if they kept on doing things and they failed. Or they could be collaborative, even when people got in their way or competed with them. And if we had people who could use those skills over and over again, not only would they be themselves living happier and more productive lives, but wouldn't we start solving all the issues that we face instead of fighting about them? And so that became my mission. So, critical mass of people, it's an arbitrary number, but in my mind, it's 5 million people. If we could get 5 million people on this planet who could be resourceful, resilient, and collaborative, we would all be living better lives.
I agree. What were some of the challenges you had to face shifting the business from education technology to the new focus?
Well, I had to stop working with my existing clients, but when you say obstacles, it's like when I decide to do something, I decide to do it. And so it's just like I made my decision. There's going to be things that are going to be hard, but not doing them is going to be harder. And I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to put together the materials for courses. I'm going to try to teach people. I'm going to see what people get, what people don't get, what excites people. I'm going to do more of the things that excite people, and started off doing courses, and then added the two books, and there'll be a third book based on the third element, and then seeing how I can scale it. So, I'd say, it's going to be, I don't know how it's not going to be me, how we're going to get 5 million people to do this, but I do know that the thousands of people who have been affected by the mind shifting, like they're finding that their lives have changed. And so that gives me so much hope. And it gives me, and none of these ideas are mine. It's not like I'm saying, Mitch, look what you've come up with. All I've done is I've taken great ideas from a lot of different people and put them together. And so I just have this hope that we get to the point where we have a critical mass of people who think this way.
Excellent. We talked about the double-edged sword of new technology, or of technology in general. Right. I'm curious how you're implementing new technology into building a business around these techniques and running your business.
Well, I use technology all the time, and I use AI all the time. So one of the things that I've just done is that first element, the resourcefulness. I've built a scalable course, and when I teach the course and we go through the techniques, I spend some time with the people in the course, and I teach them to go through with the other people in this course. It's like, okay, we're going to work on this technique. What's a problem that you have? And then I bring them through using that technique so that they come up with the solutions on their own. What I've done with AI is I've trained AI for each of 30 different techniques to use the same types of questions that I would ask. So the AI now asks a person, well, what's something that you're facing in your life where you feel that there's an obstacle, and how do you know that it's an obstacle? Just the same way I would be asking the question, do you feel that there's this voice saying, I can't do this? Well, do you think at this point, you really want to do whatever the person said? You believe that you can't do it. What if you heard that voice and you said to yourself, perhaps I can? Why don't you try that? Now, think of the thing you can't do. Do you hear the voice? Say to yourself, perhaps I can. Now, what happened to you? So that's an example of using one of the techniques. So I'm using AI to be able to scale this so we could reach more people and more people could practice it. Books are another way to scale, but you can put exercises in the book, but how many people at the end of the chapter where it says, try this on your own, how many people try it on their own? I don't. I go on to the next chapter. Okay, I see these questions. Those are nice. Let me go on to the next chapter, right? But when you're doing it in a course and there's an avatar called Maribel and she's asking you these questions, you're much more likely to go through them. And one of the people who I had going through the course as a trial, I'd say he's 55, 60 years old, and he hasn't been able to find work for 5 years. And he went through the course and he's like, Mitch, I wish I had this 10 years ago. I realized all the things I said to people which pissed them off. I realized how I got into my own head. And I never would have done that if I hadn't gone through these exercises. So I know that it works.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many books I have that have sticky tabs all through them for me to go back and do the exercises. And I try to, but I don't always get all of them. So,
Yep.
So I do want to talk about the books. You've got a couple of books on mind shifting, including one that just came out recently. Tell us about the books.
So the first book was Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success. And that's about how do you recognize when you're not being resourceful and how do you get yourself into a resourceful state of mind, and a little bit about how you can help other people do that as well. So the second course is actually on resilience, and the third course is on conflict and collaboration. And last year when I was teaching the 3 courses, it's the conflict and collaboration course that people were like, boy, did I need this. And so I decided I would skip volume 2 and go right into the conflict and collaboration. And so the name of that book is MindShifting Volume 3, Conflict and Collaboration. And everybody who is an advisor of mine said, Mitch, you idiot. Volume 2 follows Volume 3. You've got to call this Volume 3, Volume 2. And I'm like, no, it's Course 3. It's Volume 3. And in 2 years, nobody's going to know the difference because all 3 volumes are out. So
yeah, I think it's brilliant because people are going to see there's Volume 1 on the shelf. They're going to see Volume 3 on the shelf. And they're going to start looking for Volume 2.
I hope so.
And then when they can finally get their hands on it, when they're after months and they're finally get their hands on it, they can't wait to read Volume 2. Now, our audience knows, don't go look for Volume 2. It's not out yet. Jump right to Volume 3. But one, it's brilliant marketing. And two, I think you're filling the need that people really need the most right now, which why not just jump to Volume 3? So.
Right. And if you want, I can do a download of some of the techniques in the conflict and collaboration book on how do you get people to change their minds about things, the types of questions that you use. And I'll email you a link, and if you want to give that out to your listeners, they can download it for free.
Yeah, that'll be great. We'll put that link in the episode description. Everyone can download those tips. So what's coming up for you in the next few months?
Well, I'm teaching the conflict and collaboration course again in January. I mostly teach teachers because, again, I want to teach the teachers so that they can teach the kids. We've changed that course from 6 sessions to 8 sessions, and so I'm expanding that. We're going to start seeing how we can market that asynchronous course with the AI tutors, and I have to get going on book 2 because people are going to be looking for it and it's not there. And every once in a while, I'll go on vacation with my wife. Maybe we'll bicycle.
Which sounds great. So again, for our audience, don't look for book 2 yet. 1 is out, 3 is out. Enjoy those. Book 2 will be out in a year or two. So we've talked about a lot of things. Is there anything else you want to leave us with that I haven't asked you yet?
Well, I would like to say, my website is mindshiftingwithmitch.com. And I have a newsletter so that every week there's articles on how shifting mindsets affects real life. And so if it's free. So if you're interested in getting a weekly email from me, go to mindshiftingwithmitch.com and sign up for the newsletter.
That's great. And do you have any social media or links like that people can reach out and thank you for joining us today?
Oh, that I would love that. So I use LinkedIn more than anything else. I use Substack somewhat, and I use Facebook somewhat. I've been banned from Twitter or X, and I have no idea why. I hadn't posted in 2 months, and I got a message from them saying that I had violated their terms of service, and I'm like, I haven't even used it in 2 months. What do you mean I violated? And of course, there's no process that you can go through to talk to anybody about it. So I am not on X anymore, unfortunately.
Okay, well, that happens.
Right. LinkedIn, you can find me there. Facebook, you can find me there. Email or my website, you can find me there.
Fantastic. And I want to thank you for joining us today, Mitch. This has been a fantastic conversation. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening. If you found this conversation with Mitch valuable, please share it with someone who can use it. Leave us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. If you see this in your feed, you may think you're subscribed, but you may not be subscribed, and it would be a huge help to us if you would subscribe. Also, if you're on a podcast platform, since we're asking people for favors, if you're listening to this on a podcast platform where you can leave a review, it would really help us out if you'd leave us a 5-star review. So we've got lots more amazing conversations like this one coming your way. Go out there, do great things today. Onward.
Yeah, I'd like to encourage everybody to subscribe to this podcast because I've listened to quite a few of your episodes, and you always ask really interesting questions and bring the speakers to bring up points that they probably hadn't even intended on bringing up, which can really help your audience. So, the leader's mindset, everybody should subscribe.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. That's what we're trying to do here is, I know a lot of our guests go on a lot of podcasts, and I'm hoping we can ask at least one question that you don't get asked all the time.
Well, thank you. Thank you. There are probably at least 5.
All right. Great. All right. Everybody, onward and upward.